I'm Seb Colombo. I'm one of the other CFLE folks here. We'll be introducing to you the next speaker. Um, I've had a 15-year career in the data space, and I was very fortunate to work alongside amazing colleagues and customers. So I'll be introducing the next two sessions for you. And this next speaker here is someone that brings over 20 years of experience working with data. As a data analyst, as a tech business founder, as chief analytics officer and VP product back at Looker, who had the pleasure of working alongside Colin, and essentially spent his entire career helping businesses make better decisions on accurate data and fast, right? So I think we're going to see some of that theme in Colin's presentation. He's going to talk about how to, I guess, balance speed of decision and accuracy of those decisions. And without further ado, Colin, the floor is yours, and I look forward to your talk.
Perfect. Let's get the slides up and make sure this is working. So present, share screen. Okay. Perfect. I'm going to assume the slides are up, but I can't see. So let me know if I'm off here. But I'm going to jump in and talk about shipping your data strategy like a product. So I guess to start, I'll tell you why I can talk about this. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what a product strategy actually is. So trying to sort of set the boundaries of what actually makes a product strategy. And then we'll talk about what makes great product. And the whole idea here is there's a lot of frameworks around product management as a craft and how product actually gets delivered as a service. There are many fewer frameworks around how data teams actually deliver their strategy to the business. And I think when we actually pick up the concepts from product and utilize them in data, we do end up being a lot more productive for the business. And so reframing in that sense can be really powerful. So I guess first my background. So started in finance, very much as a sort of like reporting sort of worker. Eventually was at Google as a statistician, tried a startup, eventually sold that to Hotel Tonight and led the data team there. So I was just a data practitioner, did hotel forecasting and things like that. We were the first Looker customer, or sorry, the fourth Looker customer. So ended up spending about 8 years at Looker in product, but I also led the data team there. So I've sort of bounced back and forth between product and analytics my whole career. And now I'm the founder of a company called Omni. We're building a new data platform, but I will spare you the details on that one for now. So first, we're going to talk about what a product strategy actually is. And at its simplest, I borrowed this from HubSpot. There are three components of a product strategy. There's a market vision, there are product goals, and then there's product initiatives. And we'll go through each of them. So the first one, the market vision, is just who and why. So this is obvious from a product standpoint. Again, as you go build product, you need to decide who you're building it for and why your product gets to exist. You don't just get resources to go build, you have to actually go deliver something into a market. And so if we take that a step forward with a product, we're talking about the target audience and the business opportunity. So for a startup like ours, we're building a BI platform. We have to talk about other products in the ecosystem, how we price, how we come to market, who our competitors are, what our differentiation is. On the data side, we often think less about this sort of problem. But I do think it is very, very important to think about, as a data professional, who your actual customer is. And so let me give you a couple examples of how that might be different for a different data team. So at Hotel Tonight, I actually sat in the engineering org. And so my boss was the CTO, and that was the structure of how the data team sat there. Now, on one side, that means that the data team's customer could have been the CTO or your boss themselves. And our mandate could have been making the technology org more productive around decision making. So things like product analytics or exploratory data analysis. And we did do some of that work. But the alternative was to understand all the other different orgs inside Hotel Tonight and their problems with data. And so the simple example there was we had market managers that were in charge of making decisions about what hotels were on sale, where to go get new hotels in the marketplace, how to make better decisions. And ultimately, we framed our first data challenge in that company as helping market managers be more productive with data. And again, the sort of nuance here is, as a data person, you want to do everything. You want to pick up an environment and you want to say, I'm going to build self-service, and we're going to come back to that as a topic, but I just want to get data in people's hands and then my problem is solved. But when you really invert the problem to how do I make a specific customer in the company successful, and that customer might be the CEO that needs board reporting, that might be a line of business customer, you're going to build very differently. And we'll come back to what you go build. But the whole idea is, as a data person, when you are building out your data environment, your data stack, thinking about where you deploy work, you need to understand who your primary customer is for any given decision that you're making. So the next one is this idea of product goals. And that is the sort of what that you are doing to go unlock that market vision. And kind of, we'll go a step forward there, but understanding your product goals is really, how are you measuring your success as a data team? And this is a conversation that happens sort of constantly for data professionals as they build out sort of reporting and analytics, this sort of idea that data teams do need to justify their existence at some level in the organization. But to break it down into sort of the smaller pieces, from a product goal standpoint for a data team, we want to understand whether our customer is actually using the tools that we are building for them. So when you go build that corporate dashboard, do you know how many people are actually accessing it? How many are returning to it? How many have it scheduled to their inbox every day? Whether they are actually drawing conclusions based on it. Kind of similarly, if you're building a self-service environment, how many users are deployed to it? Are they returning and using it? And building these sort of same levels of analytics around consumption for your data products as you would for your products, if you will. And so the idea is that we can actually build true measurement around the success of our data team. And there's obviously sort of objective quality statistics around the metrics. That's why we're here today. And we need data quality signals, but we also want to attach those to user signals and consumption and the core pieces of how the product and business is actually sort of changing based on what the data team is delivering. And this will get more tangible in a second. And so the last one is thinking about sort of how we go do that. So what are the specific pieces of work that we are doing to go unlock our product goals and our market vision? So kind of taking a full step back. We're the data team. We want to make our company more data driven. And we're going to start with, for example, marketing. We'll go do this exercise at the end. Our success is measured by marketing ROI going up by 10% for this specific initiative. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to build a couple of dashboards that unlock an understanding of marketing spend, and we're going to build a self-service environment so that we can actually optimize ads. That level of granularity around the mandate of what a data team is building is really important to actually being successful and productive in the business. And so let's go look at a couple examples of these in the wild, and sort of, I think they parallel well to the data experience. So I have 3 kids. I always marvel at sort of the quality of the stroller market. Baby products have just like unbelievable engineering underneath them. But I think actually just looking at these 2 strollers, we actually have a really good example of thinking about the who of the customer and what product we're actually trying to deliver for 2 things that are superficially the same. They're both strollers, but do very, very different things. So on the right, you've got the sort of umbrella stroller. And the whole point of this thing is that you can pick it up and put it in your car, and that it's cheap and it's really simple. And so this is not built for the comfort of the user. This is not built for the comfort of the pusher. It is truly just built to have somewhere that someone can sit that you can take around with you at all times. And then on the left side, we've got the sort of like super premium stroller that looks nice and can sort of handle bumps. And that might actually built for the comfort of the baby and being able to sleep through a sort of walk or something like that. But the point here is that these 2 products are engineered drastically differently because they are serving completely different use cases. And if we try to build a product that actually does both of these at the same time, we're not going to do either of them well. And we also need to think through that exact same problem as we're building out sort of data experiences in the system. And again, like, we're going to draw some real parallels to data in a second. So the second example of this I love is sort of Salesforce. I don't think anyone that uses Salesforce thinks wow, this software is the most pleasant thing I've ever used in my life. But what it does do is enforce a system for how sales teams enter data, track things, and it wraps all of these in a process for how the software and the business connect together. Salesforce is as much a software platform as it is a sort of experience for how sales are tracked. And again, we can go parallel that to data in that it's not about necessarily delivering a dashboard or a self-service environment. It's about pairing those concepts with the business practices around them that make people more successful with those data, like the data pieces that we are actually delivering out. So I'm going to sort of pick on ourselves for a second here. And this is the sort of most vanilla version of self-service inside Omni. And this is very typical for any BI tool. And the things that I would be clear about is this is a very, very open experience for exploring data. So in the upper left, it's essentially just a SQL runner approach to doing things. On the right, it's a self-service point and click sort of pivot table style experience. And to be clear, this is the type of self-service that I want as someone that understands the database, wants to be able to ask any question that they can, and wants to be able to move very quickly on top of the data set. So this is self-service for me, Colin, the data team / CEO at Omni. This is not the right self-service experience for someone that just joined the company that doesn't understand our data, or for someone that isn't technical in the organization. And that is very important to understand, that it's not as simple as buy a tool, hook it up to our database. Even if we have this data model underneath that can explain fields and how things fit together, we haven't taken enough steps down that pathway to actually deliver a real self-service experience to the intended end user potentially. So if we're trying to build out a self-service environment for a very technical person, great. We've done that here. We can go move on. And maybe that person, me, can go self-serve on their own. If we're trying to build out a self-service experience for a very, very non-technical user, we probably need to think a lot more about the curation experience, the types of dashboards and content that are built on top of this, and a much more descriptive sort of led experience for pivot table style self-service analytics. So it's not just as simple as build a data model, deploy it, and call it a day for self-service. The flip side of this completely is that we go build dashboards that sort of answer people's questions. And again, I'm going to sort of pick on our demo experience here. And this is our orders overview dashboard. This is really just meant to be sort of like a business overview for how a business exists in the wild. And this is, again, I waved my hands and we made a dashboard here. But I think if we actually stop and reflect on what this dashboard is and what it's telling us, we sort of realize that it may or may not actually be unlocking what our end user needs in the product. Like if we actually think about it from the end user and the problems that they want to accomplish, it's probably answering 4 or 5 different questions at the same time that are all different, that may all be better answered individually by different types of objects. And so we'll go through it and sort of think about this. So at the top, we've got this sort of idea of these single value tiles. We've got sales price and users who placed orders and items sold. And so the quick point I would make here is, I don't know whether these are good or bad. We have no context on whether these numbers are up or down, or whether we're hitting our targets or not hitting our targets. There's absolutely no context to these. They're literally just numbers on a page. So we can probably do better there. Down here for category performance, we've got this stacked bar chart. It's probably here, honestly, because it looks kind of pretty, but it's not actually really telling us anything about the business. We don't know what categories are going up or down. We don't know whether this is as expected or not as expected. We do see some day of week effects, but that's about all that we're taking away from that chart. Up here, we have orders by status. And again, this probably looks very similar for any e-commerce company, where we've got a bunch of orders that are shipping. We've got a bunch that are processing that haven't shipped yet. And there's some distribution underneath this. But again, we have no idea whether orders by status are good or bad. And if I am working in sort of operations and need to handle orders, this chart isn't really telling me, again, other than looking nice, anything about what I need to do to make a better decision as a business. And at an overview level, if this is on the corporate dashboard, no user really has enough context to do anything with this chart. And sort of the last one is our top performing brands, but we've got this sort of idea of here's our distribution of top brands. At its simplest, it's telling us that Levi's is the most popular, and that's fine. But again, like we're lacking a context on whether these are good or bad and whether or not we need to do something here. So on one side, we have, if this is a corporate dashboard, it's not telling us whether our numbers are good enough or whether we're hitting our targets or whether we need to do something. And if this is an operational dashboard, it's almost too high level and not workflowed and not specific enough for any given department to actually go make decisions. And so if we go sort of step back and say, how do we turn this from just like a bunch of numbers on a page to something that solves a specific problem for a user that lets them go take a next step and sort of improve the business in some way? We actually can change it. So I actually went through and made this yesterday. But this is an idea of sort of reframing that corporate dashboard into something more KPI targeted for the business. And again, not perfect. I probably would want to think about a little harder sort of what I would want to look at. But what you can see here is, first, the dashboard looks a little less pretty. We should probably go try to fix that. But now we actually have context around a bunch of our metrics that actually tell us at some level whether the business is performing properly. So now we have total sales, and we can look at the fact that we're up 1% from last month, maybe not great, but up 50% from last year. So pretty good. So now we have some context that our business is growing, total sales look good. People are probably going to key in on that 1% and 46% number and track them over time. And that's great. We've got users with orders, and now we have it in the context of how many users have signed up. So 80% of our users that have signed up have actually bought something. That's probably pretty good. It's a fake data set, so we can kind of make up whatever we want. But that would be a very positive number for how good the business is doing and sort of something, again, that we could monitor. Are we bringing enough to sign up users? If this is our conversion rate, we probably need to go buy more users. And then on the sort of far right, we've got this idea of distinct SKUs sold. So now we're comparing it to total SKUs, and we can see that 62% of our SKUs sold in the last month. So we're actually getting through a lot of our inventory on a monthly basis. We almost have now a KPI for the business and marketing and our merchandising org that now we could actually drill in on any given one of those and actually start decomposing different departments in our business and what makes them successful or non-successful. At the bottom, I sort of redid these ideas of top performing brands and categories to actually sort of tune it to something that we can make decisions with or that we can actually understand the business with. So we've got this month and last month across brands and categories. And we can now very quickly see trends in our top sort of categories or brands. So the North Face, it dropped by 50%. Again, simulated data here. But we can also see on the right-hand side, hoodies and sweatshirts and sweaters both also dipped. So we have some seasonality that's happening in our sales month over month. And that was sort of broadly experienced by the North Face. I could go drill into these things. And now I can very quickly look at like, not just what brands are good, but are the brands that are positive staying sort of the most sort of penetrated in the market, and how our category is actually impacting this. So we've changed this sort of vanilla dashboard that is full of just sort of, I don't want to say spam metrics, but just sort of generalized metrics here into something that's much more tactical about almost like OKRs for the business. What orgs are successful? People can go do things. On the flip side, we can also make very, very operational tools. And this is, again, another dashboard. This is just a customer lookup. And the thing you'll notice here is it's not sort of as visually interesting, but it almost provides all the context for a given user. And this is the type of tool a support rep could pull up when Albert Mitchell calls into our business that helps us understand how much has this user spent, how new are they, what products have they bought, do I need to reverse transactions? Like maybe it links out to other tools. But this is an operational tool that helps me in the context of doing a specific thing. And so it's not as visual. It's much more tactical. You might have a lot more sort of single value objects or tables in this report, but this is actually a tool to go make decisions as a user. And then this is a very different one. This is just some clips out from some internal tools that we have, but these are very, very different experiences. So this is like a homepage experience for our product manager where they sort of took their browser window and made it so that they can see DAU trends in the product and they can also track bugs in the product. This is highly personalized to a given individual, our product leader, and kind of what she wants to see about the business. We also have like a Chrome extension where I can go open these sorts of things up in the context of a report. And these are almost like highly productized use cases for data. And maybe that makes sense to kind of jump forward, but I'll come back to some of this. Like delivering out data to your sales team inside Salesforce is probably another very, very good example of this, where the tool that they need is when they log in to view an account, they want to see stats about that account in the context of the product that they live in. And that is sort of the core problem that they have, is they're working with customers in Salesforce and they need to go make better decisions. So let's jump backwards real quick. But to kind of put a point on it, the idea underneath sort of the strategy of what teams that we're serving and then what our goals are breaking down the problem to actually sort of move and make tangible progress as quickly as possible. So this idea of sort of lean startup is very, very effective for doing data stuff. And so the quick example that I would give, and that I've given many times in my past at Looker, was this idea of customer health. And I think a lot of people get frozen up on this idea that customer health is this very precious metric that we need to spend a lot of time developing and thinking about before we can go do anything. And there are data integration challenges behind me. So like, I don't want to sort of dismiss this idea that getting all your data in order is a really important first step. But to tell a story about customer health at Looker, we collected a lot of information about how users use the product. We sort of had it sitting in sort of this more open environment, so anyone could ask any type of question, but it wasn't really productized into actually the decisions that we were trying to make as a company, which is like who we spend time with, whether our customers are actually being successful or not. And so what we actually did, and I did this personally one afternoon, is I grabbed 5 metrics that I cared about. And so you kind of see the stuff over here on the right, but it's like minutes of usage, whether it's growing, maybe a couple different features of the platform. I don't want to say randomly combine them together, but I gave them weights and I turned them into a red, yellow, green score. And this was literally 3 hours of work once we had the data in order to make a number that tried to represent whether an account is successful. And so the reason I'm telling that story is because so much of the challenge of building and delivering product is getting something into someone's hands, understanding how they use it, and then refining. And the idea here was we didn't necessarily know what a great health score was or what metrics actually truly impacted the success of a customer. But in broad strokes, we understood that it's usage-based, it's feature-based, growth is good, whether the user concentration, so like whether one specific user is your only user of the product, these are all things that matter, and almost the weights of them don't matter at some level, because if we can get all of this data in front of people, and I started subscribing to essentially a view of this across every single customer every single week, we can start understanding what helps us make better decisions and what matters. And if it's even directionally correct and helps people make better decisions, you've created a sort of positive step. And what we learned over time is that once we put this out, people started using it. Then we had dependency on it that we had to react to. And then we had to build real data pipelines around it so that we could monitor that, these things weren't falling down over time because a data pipeline broke. But the whole idea is if you started at that end state of needing everything to be perfect, it's very difficult to get started and just do it. So kind of in closing, we'll talk about sort of what makes a product good. And it's quickly this idea of, again, sort of borrowed from a sort of product state, whether it's useful, whether a user can explain it, whether it's simple enough, and then scalable, and whether people return to it. So we'll go through a couple quick examples of building this new marketing suite. So again, I think it's really helpful to try to talk about what success is before you start the work. So I want people to make better decisions, or maybe I'm trying to build a very complete reporting suite. That's what makes it useful. What is the outcome? The outcome is either a better understanding or spend optimization. There are 2 very, very different paths there that we're probably going to do very, very different things on. From simplicity, is this the proper experience for my user? So is what my CMO needs going to be the same as what a marketing analyst needs to operate spend decisions on an ad level basis. Make sure that you're taking the time to actually think about that balance. On scalability, does the reporting suite run itself? And again, I would go back to that health score. You have to deliver it first, but as soon as you deliver it and then folks are unlocking value with it, that is when you need to make sure that it scales. Because if you have to do these things by hand, you're going to have to return to it over and over again, and that's going to be problematic. And then the last one is you need to make sure that people are actually continuing to use it. So how do you actually create habit in this marketing suite that you're building out? Does the marketing analyst return to it every single day? Because that's when you know you've actually operationalized it. To go on the flip side, like a new data product is probably going to look very different. So who are you building it for and sort of why? So is it understanding the value of your product, sort of delivering data as a cost of doing business, or is it unlocking a revenue use case? You're going to build very different products for those different things. And kind of that's probably a whole presentation. But then what do we actually need to go deliver that? So are we unlocking a differentiated feature that lets us sell that our overall product better because of the reporting suite? Or is this just must-have reporting? Again, sort of very different approaches. What is the smallest thing that you can actually deliver that makes your customer successful? So from a simplicity standpoint, really it's about breaking it down to the smallest piece of value that you can unlock. And often there is this progression of, deliver a dashboard, go to something self-service, and then maybe make it predictive. Scalability is probably a much more important problem for a new data product. So how do you architect it to be reliable from day zero? Because as soon as you're delivering something in product, your SLA is very different than for an internal report. If my internal report breaks that I make at Omni, someone can send me a Slack and I can go fix it. If that's deployed out in a product, first, maybe I'm not there, but second, I may be not talking to that customer. And so the SLA for what your user expects is very, very different. And the data architecture underneath is going to have to be very different as well. And then habit, again, I've emphasized this over and over again, we need to check whether our users are returning to the product, and we can go talk to them about it. So I talked about the Salesforce example. Internal embed might be a different SLA than an external embed. And an overview dashboard might look very different than a customer lookup. But we can build out very, very different experiences sort of depending on what we want. And again, these are sort of demo data sets. So in closing, it really is about always coming back to your user. And as a data person, we need to think about whether we are successfully delivering our product and hold ourselves up to sort of understanding who is our user, did they make a better decision, and are they doing what we are trying to get them to do with data?
Thank you so much, Colin, for this very insightful presentation. I'm actually not sure we have time for questions, but maybe a quick one for me. We have 3 minutes before our next. You talk a lot about data products, and I know how you operate a lot, but how much do you think is the sole responsibility of the data team to have this mindset, this culture of shipping data products fast versus having, a certain level of maturity within the org that you operate in?
Yeah, I mean, there's always this uphill battle as a data team where if your company doesn't care about data, then you're not really set up for success. So at some level as a data person, you have no control over whether the company cares about data. The flip side of that I would say is when I walked into Hotel Tonight, for example, we weren't a data company by any means. If you start delivering out real value with data, then people lean in and want more of it. So when we didn't have real insight into kind of what rooms were getting booked in what cities and why, and what order were they going through, as soon as people got that, and I wouldn't even call that analytics, like these are the real basics, but we got those into people's hands and let them sort and look at yesterday and the day before and make a better decision. And that sort of triggered like, oh, wow, data is a thing that we can start doing. And so like so much of it comes back to find little pieces of success to unlock, and those tangible successes will unlock future things. But it's not just like, let's get infrastructure underneath and we'll be good. It's let's go make support, make better decisions. And then, the finance team will want to, and then the sales team will want to, and then the marketing team will want to, et cetera.
Fantastic. Thank you again so much, Colin, for your insight today. It was great to have you at Entropy.